Hello, hello. Welcome to Investor Next Door Club Masterclass tonight. Glad to have you guys on this session. As you start to hop on, feel free to drop in the chat where you might be watching from. If you're catching this on replay in our library, well, welcome. We're going to dive right in here in just a moment. My name is Richard Amoy, I'm one of the co-founders of Investor Next Door Club. And tonight we're going to be talking about the 7 stages of financial wellness. And some of it may be familiar, but I want you to kind of act like it's not, because I think we could all challenge ourselves in these different areas. As I go through this, I would highly encourage that you have pen and paper, take notes. You're welcome to drop questions and comments in the chat section, but I'll get to those towards the end. We keep this pretty tight. So we're going to cruise through this information here, and hopefully this creates some awareness and kind of assessing where you are, where you want to be. One of the reasons why we designed this, and we've kind of talked about it for years, is that people would get knowledge and they would increase their income and they would go to this next level, and then something would happen and they'd fall backwards. And what people don't realize is that every level requires new information just to maintain that level, not just to go to advance and go ahead again. And so I think a lot of times people get comfortable. They think, well, I've made it to this level, I'm good. It's like, no, there's a level of information to maintain. You learn the information and took the actions to get there. Now you got to learn some information to stay there. Now, if you want to advance beyond there, then that's new information. So it's a process. So I'm going to dive into this. And like I said, you guys don't hesitate. Feel free to drop any comments or any thoughts that you have along the way, and we'll dive into those as we get there. Pull this screen up. And okay, 7 stages of financial wellness. Your complete roadmap from survival to abundance. And those are extreme examples. And you're going to find yourself somewhere in one of these places on these 7 stages here. But I'm going to kind of go through these one by one at a high level right now, and then I'm going to kind of dive into each area to what they really kind of mean, what's the practicality of them. Survival is the first stage. You know, this is where stuff's tight, right? Stability, you start to get some foundation. Then there's security, your foundation increases. You're no longer feeling the burn of survival. Then you get to flexibility, and maybe you haven't got to flexibility. And then there's independence, and then there's freedom, and then there's abundance. And for a lot of people, freedom and abundance seems like not even a remote possibility. Whether you're basing that on what you do for work, your current income level, your age, whatever it might be, your education. And I want you to know that over the past 20 years, I've watched people radically transform their lives financially. The other thing that they've also done is they've radically unraveled that as well, because they forgot to learn more information or be in a community where they could learn these new things that they're experiencing or their new responsibilities. Just because you make more money does not mean you're better off. Things move into a higher tax bracket. If you're self-employed or any kind of 1099 or whatever that might be, and all of a sudden you just found out you blew all your tax liability and when you were supposed to save some of it so you could pay Uncle Sam, or you didn't learn ways that you could reduce your tax liability. So it can penalize you not being prepared for getting to that next level. You might get prepared to get to that level, but you got to get prepared to stay at that level and then decide if you want to go further. So let's dive deeper on survival. You're not behind, you're just at the starting line. And where you are right now, potentially, if you're in survival, is bills are tight, there's little or no emergency fund, and you're often carrying high interest credit card debt. So, and survival doesn't mean that you're in failure. Millions of Americans are right there right now. Over 70% are living paycheck to paycheck. And believe it or not, that doesn't have a lot to do with what you're currently making, because there are households that are making $300,000 a year that are paycheck to paycheck. 40% of those people are living paycheck to paycheck. So there's this gap, though, between survival and stability, and it's mostly a systems problem. It's not a character flaw. It's not, it may not even be the income that you're making. Sometimes it is. If you've had job loss or you had a medical issue that took place, there's things that can push us into survival. But small, consistent actions can compound faster than you actually think. Now, action steps to do here is, one, you want to audit every dollar, right? You want to track every dollar, every 7 days, right? Just look at that. But really what you want to do is, if you're using like a tool that we have with our community, is you can audit everything very, very quickly just by simply connecting all of those accounts together. And then you start looking at what expenses can be cut, what are not necessary. Because when you're in survival, you don't get to have the luxuries that maybe you did have before that emergency happened, or maybe you're just starting out. The worst thing that you can do that's always going to keep you in survival is trying to keep up the facade or the look that maybe some of your peers are doing. You know, a lot of people like to walk around with things to show that they're doing okay or that they're advancing. Meanwhile, they're paying 26% interest to hold that bag or whatever it might be. The other thing here is that you want to be able to create a good plan, a get out of debt plan. You may not be able to know how to do that on your own because most people don't. That's why we have 1.3 trillion in credit card debt. And then opening a savings account, the reason why it's good to start doing that, even though it seems like, what, I've got whatever, I got all this stuff, I'm not making my bills. Well, we got to get you back to where you can at least cover your bills. Hopefully that will happen by cutting your expenses. And sometimes there's only so many expenses that we can cut. I mean, there's living, there's a car payment. If you got to adjust your car payment by getting a different car or borrow a car, whatever you got to do, there's food, there's necessities, everything outside of necessities for a season, and you can do anything for a season, is make those adjustments. And it's proven with a lot of different studies that people that start putting little chunks of money away, they sleep better at night. They feel better, which means they're going to be able to approach their problems and their challenges better, probably because they're getting a better night's sleep as well. So don't discount having a small savings account or a small emergency fund. You can grow that over time if you recognize, hey, we're in survival. This is what we got to do. I'll tell some stories as Mary and I have gone through our journey over the past 20 some odd years in business. But then you get to stability. You get to control the chaos a little bit, build the foundation. And where you're at with this is maybe you've got 1 to 3 months of your emergency fund built up. You still have some high interest credit card debt, but it's under control. You're making the payments. Maybe you're getting some principal knocked down on those things, but your cash flow awareness is much stronger. You've recognized, hey, these are the things that are not essential. These are the things that are. And we're going to focus on making sure that we get out of this credit card debt and that we get all of our other spending in proportion so we can keep on increasing our stability. But all stability really means is you're building a buffer between you and your financial emergencies. It's definitely nowhere near freedom. But maybe you have, a debt payoff strategy, that's in place, whether you're using the avalanche or the snowball method, which has been widely promoted over the decades. And a lot of people still don't understand it. I mean, most people suffer the burden of compounding interest and they never get the rewards of compounding interest. So it's either going to reward you or penalize for not fully understanding, how compounding interest actually works. But some action steps here at this stage is, calculate your 1 month number. I would say even go deeper. You could even go to 3 months, right? Then you look at automating one transfer where you're setting up that automatic weekly, monthly, or transfer to your emergency fund and build that up. I mean, $25 a week doesn't sound like a lot, but over a year, it's $1,300. And right now, over 70% of all Americans are not prepared for $1,000 expense. Transmissions cost way more than that. Could be a mixture of your AC, which would be terrible as we go into the summertime, refrigerator, a medical thing with one of your kids. So you got to start having some kind of cushion. Some people will take this school of thought. It's like, well, I'd rather be paying down my credit card debt, have some room on my credit card in case I need it for emergency. That's okay for a period. But at some point in time, you really want to make sure you have some cash stored away that you could access quickly, that you don't have to go back and revert to using credit cards. I'm all for credit cards, meaning get the points, but not paying the banks their ridiculous interest rates. Pick a real payoff strategy. And this is where you have some understanding of the money that's coming in, the bills that are going out. And now it's like, okay, if we put $200 extra a month towards this, we could be out of debt in 5 years. Now, 5 years might sound like a long time, but let's face it, 6 years ago, we were in shelter in place. 6 years has gone by pretty quickly. We've been cooked like frogs in boiling water, started cold, then we went to hot. And what I want you to do is get present to that the next 2 years are going to go by pretty quickly. You could set yourself up in a completely different stage of life if you'll really embrace this and start getting down to the nitty gritty. And then you start looking at just, you rate yourself. How are you doing on your emergency fund, your debt control, your cash flow awareness? And then you start setting these 90-day targets. So you can start having a little bit of breathing room at this stage, and you can start making better decisions. The worst time to make a decision is when you're out of breath and you're out of cash. And typically, when pressure sets in, when you're in survival, what do? You don't move a lot. You don't breathe as much, right? So you are literally compressing yourself. This is where you get yourself into this stage quickly so you can see things differently. You're not going from emergency to emergency. You still got stuff to deal with, but you can do it with a smile on your face. Now, security, your money has your back, right? So where are you at? You've got maybe 6 to 12 months emergency fund that's saved up. It's there. You've got it automated. It's going there. And you're starting to develop a little bit more of a financial foundation. Now, you may be putting money towards 401k at all these different stages. That's fine, and you should. But you got to make sure, that you've always got enough cash. Cash is oxygen, and you got to make sure you have enough cash to get through the month and focus on the things to grow yourself. And you want to get to this place as quickly as possible. This is where you're starting to kind of pull away from the pack, right? This is where you can start to make real good decisions, and you're not as concerned about maybe your rent goes up $100, maybe insurance, because it's been crazy, goes up on you. There's an emergency. You're prepared. Like, you don't like it. It doesn't feel good. About a month ago over Easter, like literally Easter, I had to have my Suburban towed all the way back to Dallas from just an hour outside of Houston. It was $900. Now that was a dream because all the other things I got were like 15, 16. So I had the $900. Did I like paying the 900? Absolutely not. This is not about liking these emergencies. It just means that you can handle them and take care of your family. This is what's important about this stage. Now, action steps. You're going to set a full target, right? Calculate your exact 6 month and 12 month. You can do this a lot sooner before you get to this stage, but bare minimum, you got to do it here. Emergency fund targets are going to change a little bit, not because you've elevated your lifestyle, but because maybe you're looking at things a little differently. Now, you want to be building that security stack. This is where you start looking at things like the emergency fund, life insurance. Maybe you update the beneficiaries. You look at do you have a will in place? Because these things can really throw a real wrench in things when this happens. God forbid your spouse is left to kind of pull all these pieces together. You got to start thinking about these things. Now you start automate investing. Your 401k is probably already automated. Maybe you start looking at, can I put more towards it? Or is it time to open up a self-directed IRA that I use for my brokerage account or other private type of investments? You can start to look at this. At this point, either your revolving credit card debt, your double-digit credit card debt is removed, or you're really close to having it all taken care of, right? Now, you start looking at net worth different. You start making sure that you're making progress because it becomes your scoreboard. My identity is not wrapped up in my wealth. It's not wrapped up in my personal income. It hasn't been for decades. It's just not about that. But it is a scorecard to make sure that I'm doing what I said I wanted to do in this lifetime, how I want to be able to give, what kind of impact that I want my family to be able to do, and what I want my family to be able to do with that legacy. All my kids work or they're in school, and they're in the process of learning things that we had to learn over the past 10 years because for the prior 15 to 20 years before that, all I knew to do was to invest in my business. And that's what I did. That's what I was taught. That's what I was shown. And then I had to start learning different things because investing in your own business is good, but there's things that you can't control. And I didn't have these other streams set up like I needed to. Now, flexibility is a lot of fun. Mary and I have had the privilege of living on residual income for over 15 years, and we were able to do things that we never even knew were going to be possible. But where you're at with this is you got a strong savings or investment account. Your investment account is bigger than your savings account because you want your money growing at a faster pace than what the bank's going to give you. You're growing your nest egg. And I wouldn't say you're necessarily downshifting your work, but you could be. Depends on what stage of life that you're in, how old you are. I think a lot of people, they put a little too much attention on, well, gosh, I need to be done working in 10 years and they're 25. Now, granted, there's always the 1% of the 1% stories where somebody just, launched an AI company and they had a major sell off and they're doing great. The reality is most people are going to be building life on a consistent basis. Baseball games are won on base hits. Yes, everyone loves to see a grand slam or a home run, but to get to that point, you had to have men on base to begin with, right? Or women on base, depending on the game. So you got to make sure that you're playing the long game. And I find when people set themselves up with, hey, I'm doing all this so I can stop working by this time. What I find is emotionally, it actually adds stress. It's good to have goals. But what they start doing is every time something comes in that's an annoyance, then it completely throws their plan off because it's like, this is in the way. This isn't supposed to be happening. Listen, growth happens like this. It's up and down. It's still going up, but if you think it's only going to go this trajectory going up, 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 no, because we're going to get curveballs, things that we can't control with the economy, a pandemic or something changes with the interest rates or whatever it is. Things are going to always change, and you've got to be prepared to pivot and adjust and thrive in that market. Being in business since I was 18 years old, I've gone through 4 major economic downturns, right? I'm not going to go list them all right now, but obviously the most recent one was the pandemic. Prior to that, I think it was we had the financial crisis, we had 9/11. So, I mean, those were major things, and we were in multiple different types of businesses, and we had to pivot quickly. And the only reason why we could is because we knew where our numbers were. The math doesn't lie, so we knew where the numbers were. Here, your action steps are you're looking at when you could be work optional or just downshifting. I will probably always be involved in something and working because that's what drives me. I like to solve problems. I like to make a difference. I like to make an impact. So whether it's income generation or not, regardless, I'm looking at where I'm going to be able to find those opportunities. You want to be able to map your income streams. You want to know what's active, what's passive. And there'll be a time where you back off the active and hopefully you're in a position where that passive is secure enough to where you can still live the life you want to be able to live. A lot of people, they get to retirement almost a little too soon sometimes, and they're concerned about running out of money because they're going to live too long, because we are living longer as a race, right? As Americans also. So you want to make sure that you're not having to do any of these major adjustments. You want to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor, but there's no reason why in retirement you can't make just as much money or more than you did when you were working at your peak. It is completely possible. You start increasing your savings rate, your investing rate. You start looking at a flexibility vision, right? Write out what life looks like when work is optional. Create that because it's got a number, right? There's going to be some kind of expense to that life that you want. Every lifestyle requires a price to be paid. And it's going to be paid with money, it's going to be paid with time, and it's going to cost something to live that way. And I'm not talking about mansions and jets, right? If you've got that goal, that's awesome. But understand, for most people, what they're looking for is, how do I spend more time with my family? How do I spend more time with my grandchildren? How do I get to go hiking every 3 months? How do I get to go to the beach, right? How am I going to be able to do these things? And you start looking at life from the standpoint of, how do I make an impact? What memories do I want to have? And what memories do I want my loved ones to have after I'm gone? Now, independence. And again, we start getting closer to these higher stages, and this is where people start to like, this is not possible. Listen, if you're in that space right now, let me tell you something. That's a mindset issue. Your past does not dictate your future. I don't care if you've never made it. I don't care if you have made it and lost it. It does not matter. Everything can change the moment you shift your thinking around this. So where you are here is you've got passive income coming in. It's probably covering everything, all of your basic living, let's say. You've got portfolio income. Work is optional, meaning you're not working to necessarily keep the lifestyle you have. And there may be more things that you want to do. It might require some effort on your part. But some key truths here: independence number equals annual basic expenses. This is where you are, and this is a 4% rule, right? So keep in mind, there's a certain amount of money that you're going to live off that for that 4% is going to come from. So you got to kind of figure out what that lifestyle is going to cost because that number is going to be much bigger than you're probably thinking right now, and everything has gotten more expensive. Now, this is where you're involved in real estate. Maybe you're involved in some investment clubs. We have an investment club, we have a crowd fund. You've got business income that, is coming in, and it could be a faster path for most people, depending on what your desires are. This stage does require shifting from earner to owner mentality. But my recommendation is you do this sooner. You start thinking like an owner sooner. You start thinking of the expenses in your household way before you get to this stage like an owner. If this was a business, would your boss fire you? Here's the way you're running your household. All of these things are changeable and transformable in a reasonable amount of time. So don't beat yourself up. If this is intimidating you and the next few stages are going to intimidate you, just know it's a mindset and that can shift because once you have enough breathing room and you have some oxygen, you're going to be able to see possibility a lot different than maybe you're seeing it right now. But action steps that what you would do if you're at this level or trying to get to this level because you're at maybe stage 5 is you got to calculate that independence number. Look at what that's going to be. You look at what are the vehicles that are going to help you scale. There's passive vehicles, there's active vehicles, there's a mixture of the two. There's a number of things that you can do. In this day and age, the world opportunities is at your fingertips. I'm not telling you to go become a social media butterfly. Maybe you already are. You don't have to be an influencer to make influencer kind of money. And keep in mind, most influencers don't make the kind of money that you think that they're making. But you can start to look at all these different other ways that you can use your knowledge and wisdom that turns into cash. And maybe it's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit more over here. And all of that cash is going to work. Just like a farmer protects its seed, right? He protects the seed and then he deploys that seed into the next harvest. And from that next harvest, he gets more seed and he's going to increase. He's going to keep on increasing the growth of that seed. He never eats all of his seed. He never spends all of his seed. That's why he stays a farmer for decades and generations and all that gets passed down. There's a lot of wealthy farmers in this country. Now, you look at your passive income audit, you start looking at, what passive income is covering today, what do you need to cover later on? And then you start really looking at things a little differently. You want to be able to grow your money, but you also want to be able to protect your portfolio. There's things that you want to look at, and you'll have more options at this level, and you'll have more access to professional services that will be able to guide you on these paths to where, some of these are really conservative and some of them are a little bit more, we'll just use the word risky. But you can adjust those allocations depending on what your goals are. Now at Freedom, listen, you've designed your life. It's on your terms. And this is where your passive portfolio income covers desired lifestyle, the travel, the upgrades, the experiences, it's all funded by assets. The great thing about when you have income producing assets is you have access to the tax code that a lot of people don't ever have. The good thing is that way before you get to this stage, you can start accessing a lot of those tax codes by entering into real estate earlier than what you think is possible. But some of the key truths here is freedom equals independence, plus the life you actually want, not just getting by, not just the survival. There's a lot of people that get to retirement and they have to majorly downgrade their life and they start looking backwards and they're like, man, what did we do this for, right? Why did we spend all that money on that big house that we really didn't need? We could have got a different house, raised our family just fine, or why'd I have all those cars? Listen, all of it has a cost and you got to start looking at the spending on that differently. Getting into some of the action steps that would be happening here, and you would do this before you got here, is you're going to write out what that ideal month in detail looks like. You're creating what life is really going to look like. What time are you waking up? Are you working out? Are you having your coffee on the balcony? What are you doing? Be specific. You get to dream build here. Now, you get to dream build before you get here. I find it very unusual that somebody gets here that wasn't doing vision boarding long before this, or meditations, or drawing, or painting, or something where they were using their imagination to envision what that is. Now, I'm not subscribing only to the law of attraction when I say this, right? I'm a faith forward person. I believe in faith with action because faith without works is dead. So all of this comes together, but you can start doing some of these things way before you ever get to these stages because it's going to support you getting there. And it becomes part of your realization that okay, I can create life, right? I am not held captive by my past failures or how I started off or I made it and then I fell back. I've got a blank canvas in front of me. And it happens before you get to this stage. At this stage, you are protecting assets. You're looking at it differently. You are calculating your freedom number, on probably some kind of regular basis to make sure everything's good because things do adjust. There's this thing that happens. It's called lifestyle creep. It's called economy creep. There's all sorts of creeps that come in to strip away. So you can't take your hands off the wheel. You might be able to take your foot off the gas and put it on cruise control, but don't think you're going to take your hands off the wheel and you're not going to be able to look at the windshield. And every now and again, you're going to have to look in the rearview mirror. But remember, the windshield's bigger for a reason. The rearview mirror is very small, so check it as you need to. But I would say keep your eye on the prize in front of you and living your life in the present moment. And then, your freedom budget, build a budget for your ideal month. That's going to include things that you're looking to do around with, your travel, these memories that you want to create, how you want to live. Maybe there's types of, you're young enough and you still want to be active, involved in some kind of deals, or you want to serve on someone's board, or you want to work on a nonprofit, whatever it is, you want to make sure that the numbers make sense so you can have your focus on the things that you want to be focused on. At the end of the day, it's your life. You do what you want with it, but you are going to need some kind of money and some kind of nest egg to support you long term on whatever that vision or that impact is you want to make. We get to abundance. Now, abundance is one of those things where it seems far-fetched for a lot of people. And again, I'm just going to encourage you to dream. There are years and there's been months where I would have never imagined that we could have made the kind of money that we did in the time frame that we did it in, with the people that we did it, and the people that we were partnered with, and all those things. And all of it is really from having a deep belief that I can create my life from nothing because I came from nothing. So all of that is said really just for you to understand, stretching your imagination. It's not immature. It is child's play. I believe that we do need to think like a child sometimes because a child doesn't think inside of the time space continuum. It doesn't get bogged down with all of the how. It's like, I want to go from here to there. And that's good. There are going to be some steps along the way that we've got to do that in the real world that we've got to move things along, but we don't have to create unnecessary barriers because we've got these limiting beliefs or these mindsets. But where you are when you're at this stage, you are far beyond your needs, right? You are focusing on impact, philanthropy. You're looking at multi-generational planning. You're looking at things where this is what you're ultimately passing on. And again, I know we've got 20 somethings on here. We got 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70. And all of it, again, can shift relatively quickly. When you get in the right rooms, when you get around the right people, you get involved in the right opportunities, there's things that radically transform quickly. And I'm not talking about pie in the sky. I'm a pretty logical, methodical person on how I approach things, but I'm a dream builder. I'm a creative. I am very imaginative. I spend a lot of time writing, especially in the morning or in the evenings. And I look at things a little differently. I don't get stuck on, well, I don't have enough, or I don't know enough, or I don't know the right people. I start thinking, how? How? That is the most powerful word that I can come up with is how. How can that happen? How can that happen in my life? But again, I digressed a little bit. At these action steps, you're looking at your family wealth mission statement, right? And maybe this has happened long before you've gotten here. Hopefully it has, that you're doing this inside a purpose. You're not just doing this because you want to impress people that probably won't be at your funeral. You start doing real estate planning. Depending on how old you are, you're still going to have some kind of estate planning. So that's going to basically be what carries on beyond you on this planet. You're exploring a lot of charitable vehicles before you ever got here. And maybe you create your own foundation, you create your own fund. And that's something that your family is going to run, or some other person that you trust. But this is where you start looking at how life has been formed from a place that you didn't know was possible. And whatever stage you are at right now, whether it's survival, whether it's stability, whether it's flexibility, it doesn't matter. There are things that you desire that you want to be able to do and impact that you probably want to be a make. And it's hard to write certain checks when you don't have it, and it's frustrating. And there's certain things that you want to be able to provide for your family because they deserve it, or you didn't have it as a kid, whatever that might be. But it all starts with you getting into the right rooms with the right people. Now, you know where you are. And my personal opinion, not being in a financial community is costing you a fortune. I know it cost me a fortune when I would stiff arm and not get into some of those rooms, whether it was because it was a high price tag or because it was a little inconvenient, whatever it might be. But for you, now let's move you forward, right? Let's get into a community where you can start to create that awareness and a community that's going to meet you where you're at. And that's what we do at Investor Next Door Club. We work through all these stages, right? We do it as a group, you do it on your own. You've got access to, resources that will skyrocket what is possible for you right now. And I'm not talking about pie in the sky. I'm talking about being able to really seriously move the ball and take that stress and toss it away and focus on the kinds of challenges that you really want to have in your life. We do this with our curriculum, we do it with live coaching, we do it with our events. And then when you're at a place, then you have an opportunity to partner with us on different things where you have real ownership in income producing assets that you own, not that you're money at something and hoping someone else is going to be able to do something good with it. This is where you start having real income producing assets for your portfolio. Let me see what we've got going on in the chat. Awesome. Oklahoma. Yes. Government shutdowns are very difficult. Listen, we've got a all-time crazy thing going on in our country over the past few years. And whether it's the interest rates that doubled in a 12-month period, that's never happened. We've got gas prices that are incredible. The cost of everything's gone up. And people need a way to break through that noise. And it is noise. It feels like everything's coming at you. Sometimes you feel like you're fighting a ghost. And, there's been a time where Mary and I were looking for money in between the cushions to pay for gas to go speak at an event, right? I've been blindsided, by a number of different things over the years, but I'm grateful that through, my marriage, my family, my faith, my ongoing desire to learn and get ahead, we've always been able to make it through those seasons, and not just make it and survive, but actually thrive and get on the other side of that, and then have a testimony or wisdom that we could pass down. Because going through this life and going through the world of finance and business and entrepreneurship is hard if you're trying to do it by yourself. That's why communities move people along faster. So if this is something that's of interest to you, that you want to find out more about our community, get back with the person who introduced you to Investor Next Door Club, and they'll get you more information. If there's a chance for us to hop on a chat or a call or something, I'd be happy to do that. But we have lots of events and activities that we're doing. Some are free, some are for our paid club members, but we would love to get to know you. We are just happy to be on the journey with you. And I was happy that there was mentors that asked me to be on the journey with them. So this is our way of paying this forward, and we get to do it together. So thank you for being on this masterclass session. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. Hope to see you at the Inside Look.